The scent of 24 long-stemmed red roses saturated the air. Their deep crimson petals a stark and almost violent contrast against the sterile white of our kitchen counter. I had placed them there deliberately. Each bloom a silent witness to the words I had yet to speak, the pain I had yet to unleash. They weren't a welcome home present for Elsie. Not really. They were a farewell, a final act of love, or perhaps of resignation. I stood still, waiting, listening. Then, the telltale jingle of keys outside the door. The click of the lock. The familiar creak of hinges that had opened and closed 1,000 times before, always marking her return. But tonight, that sound signified something different. An ending. She entered, her presence filling the room as it always did, effortlessly radiant, exuding warmth. There was a glow about her, the kind that had once been reserved for me. It twisted something deep inside my chest, a reminder of what had been and what was now lost. Her lips curled into a soft, unsuspecting smile, but then her gaze landed on the roses. She paused, her brows knitting together as confusion clouded her expression. "Oh, Liam," she breathed, her voice carrying a delicate mixture of surprise and something else, something carefully manufactured. "They're beautiful." She stepped forward, her fingers reaching out to brush against the velvety petals. But then she saw it, the envelope, propped against a vase. Its presence transformed the roses from a romantic gesture to something ominous, something final. Her hand froze in midair. A shadow of realization darkened her features. Without hesitation, she snatched the envelope, her fingers trembling as she tore it open. Her eyes skimmed the words, the color draining from her face in an instant. The single sheet of paper slipped from her grasp, floating downward like a dying leaf in autumn, landing soundlessly on the pristine tile floor. Her knees gave out. She collapsed, her body folding in on itself as if the weight of those words had stolen the strength from her limbs. A strangled sob broke from her lips. This was the moment I had rehearsed in my mind for weeks, the one I had imagined over and over, the moment she would finally feel even a fraction of the pain she had inflicted upon me. It should have felt like vindication, like triumph. But as I stood there watching her break, I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No sense of justice served. Just an aching, hollow emptiness. Slowly, I bent down and picked up the letter. I didn't need to read it. Every word was burned into my memory, written with cold precision. _*, I know. I'm gone. The lawyer will be in touch. *_. Elsie lifted her gaze to mine, her eyes wide, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "Liam, what is this?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I stared at her, my expression unreadable, my voice devoid of emotion. "It's over, Elsie." She flinched, her lips parted as if to argue, to deny, to weave another lie into the fabric of her deceptions. But before she could speak, I said the words that severed us for good. "I know about you and Daniel." The name crashed into the silence, heavy with accusation. It hung between us like an unspoken curse. Her eyes widened. She recoiled as though struck, guilt pooling in every inch of her expression. It wasn't, she began, but the words faltered and died before they could fully form. What could she possibly say? I had proof. Unshakable, irrefutable proof. The late-night calls, the secret meetings, the carefully crafted excuses that had all unraveled under scrutiny. It had been a slow, torturous realization, each breadcrumb of betrayal leading me to the undeniable truth. I turned away, unable to bear the sight of her unraveling. My hand closed around the handle of my suitcase, already packed, already waiting. As I lifted it, something unexpected happened. A weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lifted with it. I walked to the door, pausing at the threshold just long enough to say one last thing. "I loved you, Elsie," I murmured, my voice catching. "More than anything." Then I walked out. I left her there, kneeling on the cold tile, surrounded by the symbols of her own betrayal. Roses that no longer meant love, and a letter that had ended everything. But I wasn't heading to the lawyer's office just yet. My first stop was Daniel's. I knew where he lived. I knew his routine. I knew that at this very moment, He would be at home, preparing for yet another stolen evening with my wife. When I arrived, he was in his perfectly manicured garden, pruning roses. How fitting. He didn't notice me at first, too focused on his careful snipping. But when I stepped closer, my presence cast a shadow over his precious flowers. He looked up, blinking in surprise before his lips curved into a smug, knowing smile. "Liam," he greeted, feigning politeness. "To what do I owe this pleasure?" The rage I had been swallowing for months finally erupted. "You think you've won, don't you?" I growled, stepping closer. His smirk didn't falter. If anything, it deepened. "She's a grown woman, Liam. She makes her own choices." That was it. That was the breaking point. Before I even realized what I was doing, my fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling into his beloved flower beds. He scrambled up, his face twisted in shock and fury. But I wasn't finished. Years of suppressed anger, of humiliation, of heartbreak boiled over. Blow after blow, I let it all out. When I finally stepped back, chest heaving, hands aching, he was left battered and bleeding among the roses he had so carefully tended. I straightened, my voice raw. "Stay away from her." Then I walked away. The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and the slow, agonizing process of detangling two lives that had once been inseparable. Elsie called, begged, pleaded, swore it was a mistake, that she still loved me. But love wasn't enough. Not after this. The divorce was finalized. The house was sold. The remnants of our life were divided and scattered. I left the city, moved somewhere new, started over. Daniel, as it turned out, faced his own reckoning. His carefully curated reputation shattered. His career crumbled. His life falling apart just as spectacularly as Elsie's had. There was a momentary sense of satisfaction in that, but it was fleeting. Revenge didn't erase pain. Time passed. The wounds healed, but the scars remained. I found love again, rebuilt what had been broken. Years later, I saw her name in the obituaries. Elsie. A sudden illness. The notice said. There was no mention of Daniel. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to remember her. Not the betrayal, not the lies, but the love that had once existed. And for the first time, I felt something close to peace. The story was finally over.